So as you may have noticed at this point, I like the use of metaphor a lot in my personal and spiritual practice. And I also like the use of plant metaphors a lot. And today won't be much different. Also, just to give you some context, I'm at my kitchen table, I'm having tea, and it's the morning right now, and my mind is working a little slower this week. Maybe it's the weather, it's raining here. So there may be some pauses, and I also may stop to take a sip of tea, which you might hear on the microphone, but bear with me. So I'm going to work with two plant metaphors today that have been coming up for me in my personal practice and my work as a mindfulness teacher. The first one is embodying the qualities of a blade of grass. What the hell does that mean? It means, if you think about a storm, a tornado or a hurricane or just a windstorm that takes down some things in the neighborhood, you'll see a lot of times trees falling because the tree resists the wind. The tree has sturdy roots in the ground and it is resisting the wind. So therefore, when the force of the wind hits the tree, since the wind resists back, it will sometimes be enough force to take the tree down and to uproot the tree. But you never see a blade of grass destroyed from a storm, from a hurricane. And that's because the blades of grass don't resist. They go wherever the storm goes. So if a storm is blowing 40-mile-an-hour wind in the east direction, all of the blades of grass are blowing towards the east. So in that not resisting the wind and the storm, they preserve their wholeness and their groundedness, right? The blades of grass have roots in the ground as well, just as the tree did. So both of those things are grounded. But one of them on the surface is, and that being the blade of grass, is more allowing, and therefore it is less likely to be dismantled, uprooted, destroyed. So what does that mean for us in life? At this point, it may make sense to you what that means, but I'll tell you what it means for me. When I'm at my best, I'm not resisting. I'm not controlling everything. Sometimes I could be like the tree, and then I have my roots in the ground, they're deep. What I mean is maybe the way that my thoughts work, my cognitions are deeply rooted, or my behaviors are deeply rooted. And because of that, I don't want to change. So when the wind comes blowing, I resist. Because my roots are there. I think this way, I behave this way, I don't want to be different. So there's not a flexibility. And because of that, sometimes the wind blows strong enough that it will uproot me. It will knock me over, like the storm might knock over a tree. And I can feel that in those moments. I can feel uprooted. I feel dis-ease, dysregulation. And when I'm embodying the qualities of the blade of grass, this groundedness with roots, there are still roots in the ground, but I'm allowing. Where the wind is going, I'm allowing the wind to go in that direction. Because really, what choice do we have? And sometimes the wind is going to blow. And we can either resist or allow. And if we resist, we create more force against that wind. I mentioned the roots of the blade of grass as well because there has to be some ground for that blade of grass. Because if the roots weren't strong in the ground, the blade of grass would be taken away with the wind. If there were no roots, if it was just a piece of grass that had been pulled out of the ground and the wind was going 40 miles an hour in one direction, that grass would be traveling 40 miles an hour in that direction. So it's not like not having any ground. And what a ground looks like for me is sitting in a meditation practice, feeling myself on the ground. I guided a meditation, I think it was 2 days ago, basically embodying the qualities of a blade of grass. And I'm thinking of recording one for the podcast in the next week or so. But part of that meditation practice is feeling your feet on the ground, feeling your body against the chair or the floor, having that ground, that rootedness, but then also that flexibility and allowing on the surface to allow the wind to blow, the thoughts and emotions to come and go. Another plant metaphor I've been thinking of a lot lately is I have a plant in my house on the windowsill that I've been taking care of for probably close to 3 years now, and it started as maybe it was 2 or 3 inches, a little plantling, and now it's very large. It's a vining plant, and it doesn't grow up. It grew over the pot and down, and it's probably in length now 3 to 4 feet, and it's done very well. But in the past 3 to 4 months, it has stopped growing. And that's because the pot that I have it in has no more room for the plant to grow. So when the pot runs out of room for the roots to grow, the plant will just stop growing. And it's the same thing in our life. If we are not creating space for ourselves to grow, then we will stop growing. What does that mean in the context of our life? I think it means if we're in a relationship that is limiting, or living in an environment that is limiting, or working in a place that is limited, or thinking a certain way that is limited, or behaving or feeling a certain way that is limited, we prevent ourselves from growing. So I think it's really a matter of taking an honest look at our lives and seeing, where am I limiting myself? And maybe why am I limiting myself? A lot of times it's fear. One of the quotes that I love by Abraham Maslow is, in every given moment we have 2 choices: to step forward into growth or backwards into safety. And I think a lot of times safety, or the opposition to something that might be fearful, is what keeps us where we are, keeps us from growing, from repotting our plant and having more space to grow. Because what happens when you repot a plant, a lot of times, is the plant will go into shock. It's a new environment and it won't grow. And it might take a little while for that plant to acclimate. It's the same thing for us. There may be a transition period when it's difficult at first, that shock period. But ultimately, if the plant is taken care of, if it has sunlight, if it has water, if it has food, then if once it's acclimated to that new environment, it will grow, and it will grow bigger over time. Continuing on the plant metaphor, if it's a tree, right? And let's say the tree is outside, it will grow bigger over time. But sometimes in the winters, the leaves will fall. Meaning there will be times of summer and there will be times of winter. But the roots underneath the surface are growing. And as long as we give ourselves space to grow, so in a larger pot or planted in the ground, as long as there is space for the roots to grow and we're getting the proper sunlight and food and water. So in life that might mean proper diet, exercise, meditation, social activity, whatever the nutrients and needs we have. Then we will continue to grow. But there may be times when the leaves fall, right? And it doesn't look as pretty. But it doesn't mean we're not growing. We haven't shrunk. A tree doesn't shrink. So maybe as you can tell, I've been spending some time taking care of the plants in my house and spending some time outside, learning from the trees. Ram Dass said, I'll take my teachings wherever I can get them. And I think that's very wise. There's something there to be learned if we pay close attention. So I hope that was helpful. What would be helpful for me, if you haven't done so, there is the option to review the podcast on iTunes. And some people have already done that, and I appreciate it. People have said some really nice things, and I'm glad people are getting something out of the podcast. But if you haven't done that, that would be helpful for me. Also, another thing I'm thinking of doing is opening up the podcast for questions. I think it was last week somebody in my family asked a question which I answered on the podcast, but I thought maybe I will open this up to the audience of the podcast. So if you all have questions that you want me to answer, you can email them to me. Just in the subject, just say podcast question, and you can email me at james@themindfulplace.net, and I'll do my best to take the ones that I think a lot of people have similar questions and answer them on the podcast. But thanks for listening, and I hope you have a nice day.